Hello, friends. Welcome to Lead to Gold, the podcast devoted to discussing all things growth and wellness. Happy you're here. Happy you are back if you are returning. And if you're new, welcome in. I'm so excited to have you. And I am so excited to get into today's topic because as I feel like I've been experimenting more with lately, we are getting into a very hyper-relevant topic. I actually had a completely different episode planned for today, which is kind of good for me because it's already recorded and done and will come out at a later time. But while this was something that was in the internet ethers, I wanted to take an opportunity to talk about it because I have thoughts. Isn't that why everyone who has a podcast has a podcast? Sorry. But yeah. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about 2016 today, if the title didn't already tell you that. Before we get into it, I'll give you the usual little spiel. Lead to Gold, if you didn't already know, is not just a podcast. It's also a blog. I'm really trying to lean in this year to the more analog, early internet sides of things, and I'm really trying to make blogging a thing again because it's just such a, I don't want to say it's a lost art because we have Substack, but it is just such an underappreciated medium. And I love blogging almost as much as I love podcasting. So if you want more of the kinds of things that we talk about here on the podcast in a written form, absolutely go check out my website. It is leadtogold.blog. Easy. And the link's in the show notes for you. Beyond that, if you want to stay up to date on the goings-on of Lead to Gold, I send out a monthly newsletter. It is purely only monthly. I will not ever spam you. And there's a lot of nice added extra goodies in that newsletter too. I put a lot of work into it, so follow along, subscribe to that if you are interested. And you will also, along with that, get a monthly curated playlist based off of whatever astrological sign we are entering into. I love making those. If you don't know my history, part of why I podcast and make playlists is that I used to be a radio DJ. So I really genuinely enjoy doing this and I want to have somebody to share it with. So you could be that person if you're interested. Beyond that, if you want to support Lead to Gold in a financial way, the best way to do that at this time is I also make art. And that is on my website too. You can go to the shop page and you will see all of my original artwork and prints. And I would say that they are pretty affordable as far as independent art goes. So go check it out. I paint mainly and they're cute. If you like animals and whimsical things and just like cute little scenes, you'll probably like my art. So go check it out if you're interested. Thank you so much in advance. And if you are just here to listen, thank you for that too. I love you. I'm excited to get into today's episode and I'm so happy that you're here with me. Okay, so we are talking about 2016 and how that has kind of overnight become an insane trend that everybody's talking about. And it makes sense why we're talking about it because we are now insanely 10 years out from 2016, which just feels wrong to say. It genuinely feels like it was yesterday. And I guess, at least for the people in my age demographic, this is kind of the first time where we're like, wow, we're kind of old. Like, it's been a decade since this very pinnacle coming of age era of our lives. Most of the people who are in on this internet conversation or trend are people who were entering adulthood in and around 2016. This is really funny to me because everyone's romanticizing it. I'm seeing all of these things about like the old Instagram filters and back when it was simple. And I've also written at large about this on the blog, but that era of the internet is just such an interesting thing to kind of study and talk about because I really see it, maybe it's not just me, but I really see it as the tipping point of the internet. Everything before that time was sort of early sort of like Wild West. We didn't really know what we were doing yet. We didn't know what the internet was going to be shaped into yet. And then we got up to this sort of peak of 2016 where there weren't a lot of crazy algorithm things going on yet, maybe a little bit, but it wasn't very noticeable. The explore page was still limited. You didn't have an endless scrolling fiasco on your hands every time you went to open Instagram. We still had Vine. That was like the only year that I was on Snapchat. And it's so funny. I love telling people this because I had a very, very, very short Snapchat phase. I was on it right when, this is going to age me, I feel, but I was on it right when you could first zoom in on your video. Like as you were taking the video, you could zoom in on somebody. And I just remember that being the thing that everybody did because it was funny, where like, you know, you'd be taking a video of your friend eating a burger and you could just zoom really, really, really big in on their face while they're eating. And it was hysterical. And I was off Snapchat before the dog filter. Very short-lived. I know those things feel like they overlap. So I know when we're talking about 2016, we're probably thinking about the dog filter. I was already gone. But again, I'm just thinking about the internet of that time. It was Instagram. It was Instagram with the filters. It was Twitter. Oh my God, I was on Twitter so much. It was makeup. Oh my God, the makeup of 2016. That's a big thing I've been seeing people talk about. This was Coachella's year. This was the height of Coachella fashion and the hippies and the crocheted shirts, the going out tops, Svedka. Yes, we were all into Svedka. We were all into Burnett's. And just to avoid listing literally every single trend or every single thing that was popular in 2016, I'm trying to paint us a picture here to lead up to the fact that, sorry, my younger listeners might be jealous. I was indeed a college freshman in 2016. And by the standards of the internet, by the stereotype, yeah, it was awesome. It was amazing. Can you imagine doing your full face of makeup in the dorm bathroom with 20 other girls wedged up into like 3 sink spaces, and then putting on your going out tops and your chokers and trying to get older college kids to like get you liquor so that you could drink in the dorms before you had to go out, and then walking in the freezing cold to the frat house, and then you step into this overly warm, overly wet room full of people and the lights are low and Trap Queen by Fetty Wap is playing. I mean, that was the life I lived. But it was only part of it. And this is kind of where I think, just from a personal standpoint, looking at the fact that 2016 is blowing up as a trend right now is so funny to me, because that 2016 is not the 2016 that I experienced. Like I said, there were little glimpses of it here and there. I definitely went out and did the party thing for a little bit because I was a college freshman at a pretty big party school, so it's kind of unavoidable. But what I want to really get at in at least part of this conversation is the fact that the things that we're seeing now being talked about, being compared, being like, God, don't you miss those times, is the highlight reel, as is most of social media. Not really the true version of what that year was for so many of us. And before I get into my personal 2016, I do want to also talk about what I think most people also understand about nostalgic trends like this, is that it's coming up now because we're all collectively in the end of 2025, early 2026, like, okay, we're in a fascist state. Okay, we're not having fun anymore like we used to. Okay, now we're all actually really adults and we've lived through some shit individually and collectively. And life is different. So we're going to yearn for that. We'll get into that conversation in more detail in a moment. But in short, it is coming up now because we're like having our first moment of, man, those were the good old days, weren't they? It was pre-Trump. It was pre-COVID. It was a time where the economy was relatively good and not inflated, and people were more free to be themselves and be unafraid to be themselves in a lot of ways. Life mostly felt carefree, and it was a cultural high point. But in the midst of all of that, personally, and I'm sure many people can relate to this, it was entering adulthood, and it was the most tumultuous, chaotic, scary, abrupt time of my life. I personally, in 2016, was having the worst year to date. I think back on 16 and I'm like, that was the worst year of my life. Not just because I was an adult, but because I was an adult struggling with a mental illness, or maybe several that I did not understand, alone for the first time. And you're kind of expected to do all of it yourself for the first time. We could get into so many conversations here. I want to keep it relatively streamlined in on the juxtaposition of that personal experience versus the nostalgia factor of what those times were like. But just to paint a picture, I'm going to also, if you're interested in knowing more about like the mental illness, mental health side of this, I'm going to post a blog post that I did about 2 years ago, writing a letter to myself at this time. It was kind of a separate idea, but it will definitely help readers, listeners, whatever, understand my genuine mental state. I included some journals that I wrote in 2015, 2016, 2017 that really paint a picture of the state that I was in. But for the purposes of just this episode, I was going through a breakup with who is now my husband, but it was at the time our first time being apart, and we were dating for our entirety of high school. So that was kind of the first big abrupt change. We both agreed that we wanted to try to do our own thing in college and just make sure that this kind of relationship was the kind of relationship we actually would want, that maybe each other were the people that we would want. And I don't regret doing that, despite how insanely challenging it was. But just for the purposes of this story, that I think was a huge change. And what else was a huge change, potentially even more, was the fact that I went into college being like, okay, I'm breaking this off. We're agreeing to break this off. I'm going to go be an adult. I'm going to go do my major and do my thing, and nothing and no one is going to stand in my way. That was very much the attitude that I had about college, was like, I'm going to go and I'm going to get my shit done and get the fuck out of here so I can go live the rest of my life. And that's truly the image that I had of college. I was not excited necessarily for college. I was excited to do it and get it over with so that I could be an adult and be out in the real world, which obviously set me up for a lot of failure, because college, or at least in my experience, college was 5 years. So trying to do that mental tunnel vision for 5 years straight, it's not a good idea. It's not sustainable. Probably going to have a miserable time. And you best believe by the end of my first semester, which was in 2015, I was miserable. I was not having a good time because I really hadn't made the effort of making true lasting friendships. And, you know, that changed in time, but just to kind of round it all out, this was the thing that really shook my world up and my plan up. I was so determined to live that. But when I came home for Thanksgiving break and hung out with my ex-boyfriend at the time, you know, just to catch up, just to do whatever, we ended up getting back together. And I was like, I wanted to, but I also didn't want to. And I was like, I don't know if this is the right thing. I don't know if this is going to be what I actually need to do for myself. And that was kind of the thing that like sent me into a crisis a little bit, because I wasn't sure if I was abandoning myself or if I was doing the right thing. And it was so confusing, and so like I just was not sure of what to do. In addition to that, and aside from that, it was winter and I was genuinely just not feeling good. I was sleeping in until like noon every day. I was hanging out with people who were starting to experiment more with drugs that I was not interested in doing. One of the, I would say, definite cultural standpoints of 2016 that people are leaving out of this current conversation is the Xandemic. Everyone that I went to college with was doing Xanax. Everyone. It was insane. So that was something that I was constantly surrounded by. Xanax, acid, shrooms, more drinking, more partying, all the weed, more Xanax, like constantly. That's what everybody was wanting to do. And at the school that I was at, I didn't know at the time how to separate myself from that. Parts of it I was okay with, but other parts I was like, yeah, I'm not trying to do Xanax every night. Please. No. But it put me in a funk, and I had friends go through some like really, really heavy shit through all of that. And I just felt like I was spiraling. Like I was alone in this space where everybody else is off doing their own thing and like experimenting with what being an adult is like. And I just wasn't in the same headspace at all. And I got really depressed, and I got really anxious, and I got really panicky. I couldn't sleep. I lost a bunch of weight because I was just constantly panicking. And for years, it ended up being that I would actually bury myself in my schoolwork and focus pretty much exclusively on that just to get through. Like that was the distraction for me, was I'm going to sit here and do my work and do my best. And occasionally I'm going to go out with some friends, maybe go to a house show, maybe drink, maybe go visit my boyfriend at his school where I had people that I was closer with and got along with a little bit better. And yeah, it was just so tumultuous. In between all of that, I'm trying to see counselors. I had worked with a few different therapists at my school, but some of them stuck and some of them didn't. Mostly it was just talk therapy, which was definitely better than nothing, but not probably exactly what I needed. And all the while, I'm keeping up this mindset from my childhood where I am the happy person. I don't experience depression. I don't get down on myself. I'm not negative. I am happy by nature. So when I'm not, it feels like the world is ending. And I kept up this belief and this story about myself to the biggest fault. I would not let myself go on any sort of medication. I would not let myself admit how I was feeling to anybody because I didn't want to burden them and I didn't want to scare them. But yeah, it got scary for sure. It got scary like multiple times. And eventually, I think this is, getting toward the end of my college experience and having lived with it for several years, that I was like, I can't really do this anymore. I think now is the time that I need to make a change and actually go on some medication. So that's what ended up happening. And wouldn't you know, things got so much better from there. And I want to give that younger version of myself so much grace for how much pain was there. And at the same time, I know that part of the decision making that I was doing at the time put me in a position where I felt like I could not talk about what was going on, and I could not give other people the opportunity to support me, which, as we have been talking about lately, if you go back to episode, 52, the first one of season 2, that's what the whole crux of that episode is about, is learning to accept help. it's a thing that I'm still learning today, 10 years later. The point is, I'm looking around in that year, in those years, seeing how much fun everyone else looks like they're having, and how much partying and how happy the world was and how bright and spirited and just like carefree everything was before the Trump era. And yet I look back on that time as I was genuinely fighting for my life. So where was the disconnect? And where is the disconnect now? I'm like, dang, I really wish that I could look back on this trend like everyone else seems to be right now and be like, man, what a time. And don't get me wrong, I totally do appreciate the internet culture of that time. I think it's fun and like silly to go back and think about. And I do yearn for a simpler internet. Don't get me wrong. But I haven't really jumped on the nostalgia train altogether because I don't feel the same way about it. But aside from that, I do want to talk a little bit about the insane power of nostalgia and how I see that manifesting right now in our time. And this also ties into the juxtaposition, right? Because here's really the way that nostalgia works and is working if we're thinking about this 2016 craze, right? The brain softens painful memories over time. That is a fact. That is how our psychology works. We will look back on a certain era like we're doing right now and be like, wow, look at all those cool things we were doing. Look at how fun and bright and colorful everything was. 2016 may not be that time for me, but I can certainly look back on other times of my life and be like, wow, oh my gosh, look how much fun I was having with my friends. Look at all the stuff we were doing. Look at all the theme parties we were having. Look at how hot I was and just all the cool stuff. But then once I think a little bit more about it, it's like, oh, but that was the year that despite me taking medication, I was still struggling with OCD symptoms and I was still having awful intrusive thoughts. Crazy. And it's just really interesting to think about the psychology of that happening because we all do it. Regardless of the pain that we were experiencing at a time. 2020 is another example. I even talked to my students about this where they're like, yeah, I feel kind of bad because I know it was like a terrible time collectively. And I know that a lot of people were suffering, but 2020 was amazing for me. And I don't feel like that's a bad thing for them to say. I mean, they didn't have to go to school. A lot of them, when I've had them journal about years that they would relive, they all pick 2020 because they were like, I could just kind of sort of do school, like do the things that I absolutely had to do, like log in. And then I could, take a 2-hour lunch break and I could take a nap. And then after school hours, I'd go on a bike ride with my friends. And then I'd come home and eat dinner with my family. And then we'd play video games. And then I could stay up super late. And of course, a teenager is going to look back on that time and be like, wow, that was so fun. In a lot of ways, I look back on 2020 as fun. And at the same time, I look back on it and I'm like, wow, there was so much suffering and so much pain. And that was kind of the start of this new era of constant wariness, for lack of a better word. 2020 ushered in, I think, the life that we are now living, which is making us all so nostalgic for 2016. But that's the first thing, right? Nostalgia does this kind of sort of hypnosis on us where we are not going to remember always the pain of that time. We're going to look back on photos and see only the bright spots. The second thing about nostalgia and about the time that we are currently living in, this is a conversation that I think I've seen at least very on surface level about what's going on right now, but both individual and collective nostalgia spikes when the present feels uncertain. So I've already very briefly talked about this, and I don't think I need to go into depth on it, but it makes sense that we are romanticizing 10 years ago because of all of the things that have just been mentioned. 10 years ago, we didn't have Trump. We didn't have fascism. We didn't have ICE. We didn't have all of the worry and constant unprecedented events that we do now. And it's nice to look back on that time. On a more cultural lens, we didn't have the enshittification of the internet. We barely had algorithms. We had ads, but they weren't constantly in your face. What was so nice about being on the internet back then and right about at that time is where it started to change, was that it was still kind of a free space where you weren't constantly being bombarded with advertisements like you sometimes are in your real life, like you sometimes were. Actually, I won't even say sometimes, like you were on the radio, on TV. With coming in of like streaming services, there wasn't as much of that at the time on the internet. It was like a little escapism for that, but now it's all been commercialized. So we look back on that time as simpler because it just was. And to go into the present day, now we have so many other things to worry about. And I'm looking at this in a layered way, right? This is a collectively uncertain time. Things feel life or death every single day. It feels like the next big news, the next breaking news that comes out is worse than whatever came out yesterday. And it's constantly compiling on itself. It's not actually true. It's not really like this is the worst time we've ever lived in, but it is definitely a scary time. It's regime change. There's a lot changing. There's a lot of reasons why things are changing. There's a lot of systems that are breaking down. We all know this, but it's nice to look back on a time where it didn't feel like that was happening constantly. In addition to that, that's the very, very, very collective piece, but the individual piece relates specifically to that age group of people, my age group of people, who are entering 2026 as a fully grown adult. We're entering our 30s now. So life has gotten more serious. We have to be completely, fully, 100% responsible for ourselves now. A lot of us. You know, I just got married a few months ago, so that has a level of true adulthood to it. Several of my friends are either having their first kids or talking about having their first kids or getting ready for that part of their life. So that adds a level of seriousness. People are moving. People are trying to buy homes. These are the parts of adulthood that we're not experiencing yet when we're 18, 19. At that point in time, yes, you're an adult. Yes, you still have to do a lot of things on your own, but it's for the first time. And there's still a little bit of a safety net. I mean, just to go back really quick to the counseling aspect, I don't know what I would have done if I had to pay for a therapist at that time. Thank God my university had free services that I could use, because I was not in a position to be talking to my parents about, hey, I'm kind of in crisis and I kind of need immediate help as soon as possible and it's going to be expensive. Help me out here. I don't know that they would have gone for that, you know? So it's just, you still have a lot of safety net when you're 18, 19. Even if you weren't in college, you were still kind of sort of barely out of your parents' home, out of your parents' legal requirement to care for you. And I know people have different situations and that can fluctuate, but generally you're an adult, but you're not really an adult yet. You're not really on your own and experienced. Which brings me to the last piece of why the nostalgia feels so big and why 2016 in particular for my age group feels so nostalgic and nice and like, ugh, I miss it. Here's the thing. We don't really miss the era. We miss who we were. We don't really miss 2016 in and of itself. We miss the feeling of not entirely having to do it all ourselves yet. I think that's the key. And again, I know that wasn't really my experience. I didn't personally feel that way, but I think at large, that's why this sort of viral moment is happening, is because we miss the carefreeness of living that life. Earlier today, even, I saw a reel that summed it up absolutely perfectly, and it was so funny. One of my friends, who is now a mom to a 2-year-old, Megan Nunes, if you go back and listen to our episode, she posted this video of a girl who was like, 2016 me thought that I was going to be forever wild and free. Even that language is just so 2016 coded. Forever wild and free, right? And it's videos of her in the club, in her little dresses, in her going out tops, wearing the heavy makeup, just partying, just having a great time. She looks great. She looks hot. She's with her friends. She's in the club. She's dancing. And then flash forward to 2026 me, and it's her driving in the car with her young child in the backseat who you can't see. And you just hear her say, I know you wanted to go to Starbucks. I know you wanted to go to Starbucks. And the kid is in the back fucking screaming like a banshee. And then she just looks at the camera. And I was like, yep, I think that about sums it up. We miss who we were in 2016. We miss being 19. We miss being 20. We miss still illegally drinking, but like partying and being hot and having energy and going and just doing all of the new things for the first time. It was like that new sense of freedom. I think of that time for me more as like getting my license for the first time. That was the time where I was like, wow, I'm truly free. I can go do my own thing. This is amazing. Ugh. Coming of age is so romantic in hindsight. It's so romantic. I mean, think about all of the coming of age media that we have. I think immediately of Lady Bird. Oh, that's one of my favorite movies. It's so good. It's so good. If you haven't seen it, you should. But all of the coming of age tropes that we have, that just that part of life, it's so romantic. It's so full of yearning and full of passion and just like, I'm going to make something of myself. I'm going to do something with my life. Ugh, it feels so good. But as it's happening to you, it's like the scariest part of life. It's like the scariest thing. Ugh. It's such a juxtaposition. It's such a two-sided thing. There's so many different ways to look at it. I do not personally romanticize my 2016, but I so understand why people do. Here's the thing, though, is that many of us were either sort of curating that highlight reel or at least consuming the highlight reel and having fun with it. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I also think that many of us were deeply struggling beneath it. Here's another thing that comes up for me when I think about this time. This might not relate entirely, but there's a thread here that I want to pull on. The school that I went to, and I'm sure many schools do this, really, really tried to make their tours feel like Disney World. What I mean by that is you would go and do a tour, and they really stressed the whole, they literally said, everyone else's favorite place on earth is Disney World. That's the happiest place on earth. But I think this school is the happiest place on earth. I just love it here. Everyone has a place here. You'll find your people here. I mentioned earlier that it was a big party school, and I'll give a little bit of credit. Even if you were not a party person, yes, there were still a lot of communities to join. There were a lot of students. You could find your person and your people if you looked hard enough. I think that is true. I think when I initially came into the school, I was very enamored with the idea of joining clubs and trying to put myself out there in ways that I wasn't used to doing. So I know this contradicts something that I said earlier, which is that I was very tunnel visioned in on just like going and doing the thing and getting out. I think both things can be true at the same time. I wasn't joining clubs to make friends. I was joining clubs to try to expand my skills. And maybe I would find some people along the way that I was like, okay, you're cool. I'll hang out with you. I'll be in this group. I'll grow in this way, these connections, that sort of thing. But anyway, my college really touted that idea that there is something here for everyone. And regardless of who you are, you're going to love it here. That is not the experience that I saw. I really found it interesting. And I actually just recently talked to my mom about this, about how this was a side conversation. She was complaining about kids these days, which I have mixed feelings about. I won't get into it here, but she and I were talking about how differently kids these days in 2026 are about socializing and about independence. And she's like all worried that, the kids these days don't know how to be independent. They don't know how to do things for themselves. And I was like, yeah, I think there's truth to that. But I also remember when I was going through my freshman year of college, and especially in like the first few weeks of moving out, there were so many people from my high school that tried college for literally like 2-3 weeks and couldn't do it. And they dropped out and came home. And I'm not judging those people, but I'm saying that to say I saw even more of that at the college that I was at. By the end of the first semester, people were dropping out. By the end of the first year, people were like, this is not where I want to be. I don't like it here. I'm not making friends here. This feels too big, too scary. I'm going to either drop out or transfer and go to a much smaller school closer to home. I say this to say, this is the thread that I wanted to pull on, was that even the image of like, this is your perfect dream school, you're going to have so much fun here, I think it relates to that image of 2016. This is the perfect life. It's never going to get any better than this. Look how happy and fun and colorful everything was, and how happy and unbothered and carefree all the people were back then. But that's not real, because that wasn't the reality. I saw it. I lived through it. I know that that was not really, truthfully, universally how it was. If 2016 was your year, this is not in any way me trying to take that from you or to try to harsh on this trend. I hope I've made that clear by now, because, again, I think it's quite fun. I love thinking back on that time of the internet, especially. But I just think that there are a lot of the less sort of aesthetically focused ways of thinking back on this year. Which brings me to the conclusion, I guess, of my thoughts, which is that maybe it's just me. And again, not trying to harsh on the trend. It is really fun, and it was a fun time. And yeah, God, I miss the Instagram that didn't have an algorithm. And I miss ad-free Netflix and ad-free Hulu and all that shit. Oh, I miss it. I do. I miss Spotify being $4. I'm not on Spotify anymore. That's not the only reason why, but that's a conversation for another day. I really do have a big appreciation for this time. And I am more interested personally in the ways that we have grown since going through everything that we have post 2016. I think I can confidently say that I like 2026 already. I like what we're heading into a lot more. Not because of the culture that we're currently in. Please don't get that twisted. But because we've matured. Because we're not wearing rose-tinted glasses anymore. 2026 is not for the weak. The past 5 years have not been for the weak, okay? I'd argue the past 10 years, literally, everything since 2016 has not been for the weak. We're all tired of living through unprecedented events, but living through those things gives us grit. It helps us to see what amount of resolve we actually do have, how much we can actually stick out and get through together. I think it shows us how much more rich life can be when we work together in it. And I'm about to maybe also give a hot take here. I look back on 16 as extremely individualistic, extremely. It was all about curating the feed. It was all about showing off. Look at how much fun I'm having. Look at how hot me and my friends are. Look at these parties we're going to. And it doesn't feel like it's necessarily cool to do that anymore. I know we all know that like the amount of posting that we do as a collective has dramatically decreased from 2016. God, I used to post almost every day, like a hard post, right? And there's a lot of reasons for why culturally we're not doing that anymore. I actually listened to a really interesting podcast about this. I won't go into detail, but maybe I'll post it in the show notes. Apparently, the addition of stories to every single social media, Instagram being the top one that I'm talking about in this conversation, actually lowered people's desire for wanting to hard post because we prefer the disappearing of the stories. It feels less permanent. I mean, it is less permanent, but it feels safer in a way to post to stories rather than posting to the actual feed. The feed is for like the really, really big things exclusively now. I won't get into detail on that. I just thought that was interesting. Anyway, I think that now we are more collectively starting to come around to the idea of the collective. We are rebirthing this idea that we actually do need each other and that inconvenience is going to have to be a part of that, and that the inconvenience is okay. Maybe it's just the spaces that I'm in, but I would like to believe that that is becoming the narrative more generally. I think in addition to that, and this also goes back to my personal experience of the last 10 years, 2016 was so individualistic. I was very individualistic. I had a vision for myself and a goal for myself. And also, I will say, it makes sense that we were individualistic in that age group. You're 18, you're 19, you're setting out to do your thing and live your life. There's nothing wrong with that. But I realized that I was extremely lonely and that I was extremely lost somewhere in those years. And the thing that brought me out of it was community, was understanding that I'm not going to be able to get the things that I want if I don't lean on other people. And then it became not just about me. We as a collective are not going to be able to move the world in the direction that we want it to move in alone. For so long, we've been sold that idea that individual actions add up. And sure, I don't think that's completely untrue, but the true work lies in what we can do together. That's what's going to actually push the needle in the direction that we want it to go in. Beyond that, I think a lot of the inner dialogue has changed from 2016. Because it was such a post-heavy time, I think it was also an extremely performative time. And I don't know that I feel that way anymore. One 2016 coded video that I keep seeing is a video of Kylie Jenner, like at her youngest, skinniest, most youthful, like hanging her head out of a car window and just looking like life will never be any better than it is in that moment. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. But very peak 2016. It's curated happiness. It is kind of the era of the influencer really, really starting to take off. And it's also the era that we started to confuse visibility with worth. I know years before that, we still had the like button and we had other sort of artificial ways of showing appreciation for people, but this is really where it took off. And we haven't really found a solid way out of that, but I do think for sure now in our big ages, now in our true adulthood, we care less about being impressive to people, and we value honesty over whatever we can curate. We definitely are more interested in learning things online largely than just seeing hot people and watching other people's vacations. I also think in this time, because we are becoming true adults and because we are now in a position where we have our own lives and we have other people that we need to worry about, we're building lives that belong more to us than they belong to any sort of platform or audience. That's really a key distinction. And I know that that extends beyond just the years as they are. It's the age that we're now in. I mean, in 2016, I was trying to maybe look like I was living, or I think largely we were all trying to do that. Now, I think we're all more interested in actually feeling alive. Here's another nice thing. And this goes back to the coming of age and the unseen fear and scariness of that era. The part that we don't talk about. In 2016, we're all more likely second guessing ourselves constantly. Like we've just been talking about, looking outward for permission to do things. I know I was. We were extremely afraid of making the wrong choice and ruining our lives. Oh, that's me. That was what I did. We were definitely, I think, collectively feeling like adulthood was a test that we could very easily fail. In multiple ways, I felt that. Financially, romantically, what I was actually going to end up doing with my life. And if I didn't immediately get hired right out of college, I was going to fuck up and just die. I don't know. But now we've survived 100% of our worst days. We have made those mistakes. We have been through the trenches and we've lived. We've come out on the other side. It's not like it's never going to happen again. It's not like 2026 isn't impossibly hard some days. But we have been through hard days. And we can adapt. We know that we can live through this because we have lived through this. I think most of us probably better understand our patterns now. The ways that we deal with hardship, because now we've seen some shit. We've been through it. We can see the cycles and seasons that we go through, and we know how to account for them as they're coming. You know, I think now we have learned that feelings are temporary, that happiness is not a constant. I know that's a cliche at this point. So something in the last 10 years has made that a cliche. And being confused is not equivalating to failure. Like, we've grown beyond that. What maybe felt like something that was a broken system, like we were broken, if we made one wrong mistake, if we didn't know what we were doing, if we didn't follow the timeline. I know that was a big era. I now recognize what a gift it is to have an unfinished project. I'm going to bring up Florence Given for a moment here, because saying that just made me think about her and another quote that I love from her, which is that the journey is the best part. And once it's over, once you get the thing that you want, that's like, oh man, dang, it's like, it's over. Like there was so much magic and learning and growth in the journey. I know I can relate to that because I know we've been focusing in on 2016, but let's like flash forward a little bit to 2019 through 2021, where I was finishing up school and moving around constantly. It felt like I was moving into a new place like every few months. It was insane. But I remember liking that in the moment. Like at the time, I was like, this is kind of fun. Like I like being in the journey. I like constantly having to move and constantly bringing my things new places. Like it feels like what I'm meant to do at age 22, 23, whatever. It was just nice. I liked the chaos because at that point in time, I knew how to thrive in chaos. And here's the last thing that I will say, why I think 2026 is maybe better than 2016. Because back then, it's again the coming of age thing. We were still becoming ourselves. We weren't rooted anywhere. We were constantly doing that transition, but not really having a home space. But now that we're here, we've landed somewhere. We live inside ourselves more comfortably. Yes, it might look a little bit boring. Yes, it might feel less exciting than 2016 did. Maybe we've lost a little bit of that youthful glow. Maybe we've gained a few wrinkles. Maybe we've gained a few pounds. Maybe we've gained entirely new people. But we belong to ourselves in a way that we never did before. Back then, I didn't know who the hell I was. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't even know if I liked myself, period. I was kind of just constantly trying to get away from myself, actually. So it's nice to now be in a place where I like it here. I'm comfortable here. I feel good here. And I will say that's been a weird experience since I've moved in and since I've settled down with my partner. We own a home together. I'm extremely fortunate for that. We'll never, ever, ever, ever take it for granted. But I remember getting settled here and then finally like being out of that space of constantly moving and constantly going everywhere all the time and like not having anything, not owning anything. And now suddenly you're just here, you're planted. And I kind of freaked out a little bit. I was like, whoa, there's so much room here. What do I do with it? Like, I'm kind of bored. It's like weirdly quiet. What do I do with this? So, I don't know. This is all ending up in where we are today. And yet I have appreciation for that past version of life. But I know that we're not going back there anymore. And I know that that's the part of nostalgia that sometimes is the most painful, is just the knowing of like, I'm never going to live that life again. I'm never going to be that young again. I'm never going to be that hot again. Not true, by the way. Don't tell yourself that. But it's just a way of seeing how far we've come also. And I think that maybe we'll look back on this time and see the difference between these two times and be like, whoa, look how much growth happened there. Look how much learning happened in between those 10 years. Look at that little baby, sweet summer child, and who they grew into, and have appreciation for both versions. Not of only of ourselves, but also of the worlds that we lived in. Now, trust me, I think I put this on my personal Instagram. I know that the world and history are not going to be kind to 2025 and probably not 2026 either. But my hope, my optimistic hope, is that someday in the future, we will look back on this time and love who we are right now for getting through it and learning through it. Just my thought. So, I want to wrap this up just by saying, I love this trend. I love a nostalgia trip. I am probably the most nostalgic person I personally know. So it's really funny to not really be in on it this time. But I wanted to talk about all of the different layers of it because I do think that sometimes what we miss isn't necessarily the past itself, but the safety, the seeing that, hey, I was okay then. And right now I don't really necessarily feel okay. And I just want to know that I'm gonna be okay. There's no way to really comfort ourselves in that right now because we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. There's no real clear-cut truth. And I just think that's maybe what brings us so much comfort, is seeing a past version of ourselves and being like, oh, she was okay. I don't know if I was, but here I am. So I guess I was doing something right. I don't know. I was hanging on. But anyway, that's the thoughts for today. Let's get into our little game of We're Not Really Strangers. We do this at the end of every episode just to give a little something to think about. And I'm going to pull from a different card pack today. Normally I do the healing edition. Today I'm going to do the forgiveness edition because I'm thinking about little 19-year-old me, and maybe the question we get will speak to her in some way. So here is the question. Ooh. Okay. What have you been hardest on yourself for recently? And what would you say to a friend going through a similar situation? I like this one. Okay, so maybe we're not talking to 19-year-old me, but I'm going to have her in mind with like if she was struggling with this. Ugh, that's my girl. But all right, lately I've been struggling and been hard on myself about my aging. Actually, I have been hard on myself about my aging because I am entering into my true Saturn return. I know that this is the time of life where we all start to get like, oh shit, like I'm not really, I mean, I'm still young. I'm not even 30 yet. I know I'm still young, but I won't ever be that young again. Right. And that's a little scary. And I am really concerned right now with just trying to continue to take care of myself and still be active and still be mobile. Like that's really big to me. It's kind of starting to freak me out that like I'm going to lose my mobility someday, and I don't want that to happen. Like I want to be the 85-year-old woman who can still stand up by herself, right? I want to be able to take walks. I want to live a long, healthy life. So I'm thinking a lot about that lately, and I'm struggling with motivation to really keep it up. And I'm just kind of struggling with aging a little bit in general right now. But if I were to talk to a friend or maybe my 19-year-old self experiencing that same fear, and it's funny because I do all the time, I would say, we're not old yet. It's great to care about those things, and it's great to want to be your best self and to want to take care of yourself. Like that is a very noble thing to want to do. But also don't lose yourself in that. Like you can still have fun. You can still stay up late. You can still drink. You can still do the things that you want to do and balance it with this new goal of like, hey, yeah, let's also take care of ourselves. Both things are taking care of yourself. So long as it's not a self-destructive habit, you know? I don't know if that's necessarily the advice that like everyone would want, but that's probably what I would tell myself is that like, hey, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. Just make sure you don't lose yourself in feeling bad about it because you really can't stop time. You are going to get older. So make the choices that you need to make to feel good about that because you can't help it, you know? I don't know. What about you? What have you been hard on yourself for recently? And what would you maybe say to a past version of yourself or to a friend going through a similar situation? I'd love to know. If you want to reach out to me, my DMs are always open on Instagram. Feel free to respond to that question or to just let me know how you felt about this episode, what your thoughts are on the 2016 trend and beyond. Would love to hear from you. And as always, thank you so much for being here. I'm just so happy to be having this up and running again. It feels like home. And we'll be back here in another 2 weeks. We will be on the blog next week. I have a really fun and juicy topic to talk about there that I've already kind of started working on. So follow me there. I'll see you soon. I love you so much. And in the meantime, take care of yourself. All right. Bye.